Greetings, YouTubers. Today we talk about this little fruit. This ugly ass fruit is amazing. It's called a persimmon. It's endemic to North America as far as I'm aware, and I think China as well. So we're gonna make persimmon donuts. A lot of you guys requested I make a video of it. I didn't really think much of it, as it was just using scraps from my pantry, including some really ugly bananas. So we're gonna make some gluten-free, dairy-free persimmon donuts. It's not really a donut to me. If it's baked and doesn't have any yeast, it's a fucking cake with a hole in it. Anyway, welcome to Berserk House. Alright, first of all, I'm not trying to flex on you guys with my beautiful, sweet ass KitchenAid, but it is nice to have, and it's 6 in the morning. I've been up all night making a birthday cake for someone, so we're just gonna speed this along. I already pre-measured most of the things just to keep it cohesive and neat. As always, when you're doing baked goods, you want to keep your dries separate from the wet mix until you've got all of your dries incorporated, with the exception of a few rules. So we're going to start off. We've got 1 3/4 cup. We've got 1 3/4 cups of gluten-free flour, all-purpose, nothing special. I would make sure it has xanthan gum in it. If you're against xanthan gum because of X, Y, and Z, then it's going to be really difficult to control your textures in a gluten-free setting, but there's always a workaround. So it's 1 3/4 cup of the flour. Then we've got 1/2 cup of sugar, granulated organic sugar if you can. If not, then it's sugar. It's not that great for you anyway. So it's 1/2 cup of that. Now, I got baking soda in this little container just to make it easier, some salt, baking powder. We've got Saigon cinnamon, it's my preferred cinnamon. Well, really Ceylon is, but this is what I have right now. Nutmeg, I have fresh nutmeg, but to make it easy for you guys, we're just gonna go into it with ground nutmeg. So you're gonna throw into a container or directly into the mixing vessel, doesn't really matter. I'll do it right here, make it all nice and Martha Stewart-y. I'm gonna do about 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of the nutmeg. You don't want to use too much nutmeg, it can be pretty obnoxious, but the main proponent of a old-fashioned donut, for example, is going to be the nutmeg flavor, so we want that there. Just to be reminiscent of an old-fashioned, this is not technically an old-fashioned. Right, I would just do 1/4 teaspoon of salt. You can do 1/2 or even a full teaspoon like some people, but that is just, it's too much. Okay, so then we're gonna move on to the baking soda, of which you will put, let's say 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and then about 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder. That should leaven this just about right. If you're above the fucking peaks of the Rockies, you gotta change how you do these things. I don't know the conversions for that. Always level out when you're measuring, elsewise you'll just end up really, really off. Let's mix in here. I'm just going to give it a quick preliminary mix just to make sure everything is nice and cohesive. Alright, 2 eggs. Room temperature is the best temperature to mix your eggs. Really, it's the best temperature to mix your whole batter, that's what I should say. Alright, so 2. No shells. If you get shells, it's not a big deal. Some people, they go all kinds of crazy over it. It's really not that big of a deal. So straight into the batter, we're gonna put it on low. We got a 1/4 cup of oil. I use olive oil. You could use whatever you're comfortable with. Just be careful if it's an off-putting flavor, like let's say sesame, you're gonna have sesame donuts, which is kind of cool. Persimmon, you want it to be really ugly. I mean, not rotting and falling apart, but on the verge of it. I just pull out the plug right here. It's part of the stem. Really, that's like the calyx. Not that you need to know that. And I throw in the skin and all, just give it a whirl. It's not pleasant to touch by any stretch of the imagination. These bananas, same story, real ugly, but they're ripe. You don't want to overbeat this, but right now I'm just tackling all my beasts at once. So I'm going to slide it off like an ugly slug. Alright, I gotta go wash my hands real quick. But the other thing is about 2 tablespoons of milk. I use almond milk today because I need to get rid of my almond milk. Alrighty then. So, 2 tablespoons should get you where you need to go. If for some reason your batter is too wet, you can add a little bit more flour, but start off slow. You can always add more, you can't really take away, and it'll get too doughy and really just not be a pleasant mix. You can turn up the speed, sides real quick, make sure everything is nice and even. By this point, it should be pretty wet, but not liquid. It's going to be a very, very thick batter. If you haven't preheated your oven, I should have told you to do that already, but 350, just set it before you start anything. That's usually how I do it. Alright? And let's give it one more quick mix, and then we're going to be ready to grease our pan. I really don't feel like I should have to explain that, but I'll go through real quick. I've got paper towel clean, of course, sitting in the non-dairy butter that I use. Don't worry too much about whether or not the persimmon skin has broken down. It turns to nothing once it's cooked. But if it really bothers you, you could skip the skin. Try to get a view of this mess in here. So, everything is nice and even. It's not too glutinous, so it's not like the creature from the Black Lagoon's horrible slimy brother. It's just kind of like really, really thick pancake batter. You could opt to make this as one giant cake. That's, you know, if that's in your realm, then just go for that, man. You know, it's gonna taste the same. Just give it a light greasing. I just really saturate with room temperature butter. The rag, it's paper towel. The paper towel with butter. You don't have to over grease, like this one's over greased. So let's show you what that looks like. This one will become a mess if you don't wipe out the excess. So if you gotta get a new paper towel, just grab a new one or just keep working it. Make sure they're all more or less even. Doesn't have to be perfect, it's not rocket science. I only have 1 donut pan, so I'm doing this in 2 batches. You can do this in 2 batches or 1 batch if you have 2 pans. You're done with the butter for now. Now, feel free to do this with a spoon if you want. I didn't grab one, so there we go. No retakes. You just want to spread it out evenly at first. You'll come back and fix it. Just get it into the container. Come on. Try not to overfill it. Remember, this is leavened, so it's going to rise quite a bit. So what I do is I try to get it so I can still see the top of the stem. I haven't really been using this tray for long, so I don't have a preferred method, but if you have one and you do this all the time, you've already got it down packed. Why are you watching this video? Just make it neat enough. It's not art. No, I guess all food is art. You just spread it. Just spread it and forget it. Got my cats dropping stuff in the background. It's all good. Just try to push it so it's down evenly along all the sides, making sure there's no air gaps, because that would be one sad donut. It'll spread out as it heats up, but might as well give yourself every advantage you can get. Even if you screw it up, it's not a big deal. It's just food. Try not to waste. Salvage it if you can. If not, you live, you learn, and you just rinse and repeat like anything else. It's like 80 degrees in this kitchen right now. We normally keep the house at morgue temperature, so this is a pretty hard one to shoot today. Alright, not gonna kill myself. It's good enough. Put it in for about 14 minutes. I check it at 10 minutes, make sure it's either done or not done, and then continue from there. Alright, it's pretty self-explanatory on how to cut a strawberry, but let's go through it. You can just pull the stem, toss it to the side, right? Then you can work down the edges and just avoid the core if you want, right? So, do that. Or you can pop it out with a straw. Honestly, it's unnecessary. You can sit here with a paring knife and just slide along and remove it. It really depends on your workflow. Honestly, for me, it just depends. You can totally just slice around it again and discard it or pull it out at that point. Try not to waste any of the berry itself, but it happens. Don't overthink it. It's a strawberry. Alright, so then I would just slice them up. Oops. Alright. You can keep some for presentation. Honestly, I don't really like fruits on donuts. Yeah, but if you want to feel fancy, go right ahead. It's not hurting anyone. Attention to how you're slicing them or whatever. You can do a fine chop, thick chop, whatever. Just get them cut up. We're gonna basically chop it into a puree and then add a little bit of honey to it. So I use about 4 medium-sized strawberries. You want to get the ones with the best color. Those will generally have the best flavor. Don't go for the largest ones. Those have the worst flavor. Sorry about my knife, I gotta replace it. In the absence of fresh strawberries, sub out any preserves, like raspberry preserve, strawberry preserve, whatever you prefer. Raspberry preserves would be nicer than strawberry preserves, in my opinion. I've done it with strawberry preserves though. Try not to lose the You can use a cocktail muddler if you have one, or the back of a spoon, and just really drive this mix home. Or you could run it through a mortar and pestle if you have that. If you're really pressed up and don't have any of that, you can use a sieve and a spoon. That works really well. It'll prevent any sort of texture from getting through. But if you like a little bit of texture, then this is the perfect way to go. Produce a little bit of a juice. So you don't have to go too crazy. Do what makes you happy. This is where it all gets a little bit tricky. It's not an exact science for me. So, depending on how you cut your strawberries and how you mash them and all that determines how much liquid you're going to have. So, to make it easy, just start off with 2 tablespoons. Heaping tablespoons are fine. Lock your blender in and go for blender. Mixer. I just turn it on, so that way I'm ensuring the texture is more or less homogeneous. Now you're going to lower it, and really carefully try to get your powdered sugar in. Half of your powdered sugar first, and then the rest of it. So now we can turn up the speed, now that it's not threatening to cover us in powder. And just slowly crank it up. Don't just go from 1 to 1,000. It's looking a little bit dry. I'm going to add 1 more tablespoon. Be a fairly thick icing. Lower it down again. Add some more sugar. I would reserve the last 1/4 cup or so, just in case. We're likely going to use it all, but depending on the humidity in the air and just how moist your strawberries end up being, it'll change. You can add another tablespoon. And then you're going to want to do like a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla. I can eyeball it, but I would advise measuring it unless you really, really fucking like vanilla. Give it a break, scrape down the sides of the bowl, check your consistency. Chance you end up making it too liquidy and the icing is just running everywhere. You can just pour that over the donuts, or if you want to salvage the texture and have it set hard, just gradually add more powdered sugar. Okay, so take a toothpick, a really thin knife, whatever you got, and you just wanna go through the thickest part of the donut. If it comes out clean, you're good. You could then take the same thing, gray, and just roll along the edges. Try not to go through the donut. Bless you, cow. Remember, your pan is going to be really fucking hot, so don't touch it. Right, just roll along. I'm going to get the donuts loose before they cool down too much, in my opinion. Then it becomes harder to pull them, but your mileage may vary. Maybe you got some freakishly good luck. Let it sit in the pan for 2 minutes, and then we're going to pull it. So these are about ready to pull. Lightly tug along the edges, loosen it. You can go a little longer. This flour doesn't get too dark. Gluten-free flour doesn't exactly darken the way regular flour will. Not always, sometimes it does. But by that point the donuts will be a lot drier, so I prefer to pull them now while they have this little bit of brownness on this side versus the pale front. So, I don't know. Alright, so we've reached the part everybody's been waiting for, the end. Just pour off my icing into a shallow container. For video purposes, I'm just using this plate. Then all you're gonna do is take your donut, drop it in, give it a little wiggle if you want, whatever makes you happy. Drop it down. Grab your next one. Same thing. Just give it a slight swirl. Twist up when you're coming off. And just drop them in and pull them out, but sometimes the icing pulls itself away, and that is less than desirable. Da, 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 da. That's all, folks. There you have it. What do you do with too much icing? What do you do with too much icing early in the morning? Stick it in a jar and put it in the fridge. Yeah, you just put it in a jar and put it in the fridge. You could freeze it, but don't do that. Label it, put it away, or be very American and just eat it. Gobs of it. So yeah, I hope you guys found that entertaining, delightful, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe, give me money.